Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This week's show, I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Gentleman, Season 1, Episode 3. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So the opening of the episode involved Jimmy, shipping out and everything. He's supposed to make the delivery, which the moment he stopped, I was like, oh, you're about to get robbed. I was like, I know that's what the scenario is. The moment he met Gabrielle, and she's like hitting him up of like, oh yeah, I was like, oh man, you're getting honeypotted right now. And it's like, I didn't know how that was going to play out. Grabbed the key, gave it to her partner. They took off with the van, and he was none the wiser. It didn't, I guess because of the parking lot where her bike was versus where the van was parked. You would think, because where he was sitting at, all he had to do was look that direction, and you get, because you're where he's sitting at is right in front of the van, so it's not directly in front of it, but he has eye line on the van. To be fair, he was blitzed out of his mind high, so it makes sense, but still. So that sucked. And then they couldn't find Jimmy later on. I was like, did he go run? It's like, no, we end up finding out from Jimmy his long story about what happened. Obviously talking about meeting this angel. She didn't have wings, or at least none that I could see. And then basically he was looking for a ride. The 42nd ride that came by ended up being a car full of priests. And he was like, I never knew I only recently learned, I forgot what I was watching, and someone referenced the word nonce, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that's what nonce mean. I've probably heard it before and never realized that, but yeah, basically it's a British slang term for pedo. I forgot what video I was watching. It was in reference to a meme or something, and someone's like, "Oh yeah, this person had no idea." This British person calling them a nonce, they had no idea. They were completely unaware, and it's like, yeah, that was the context of it. But yeah, but he was like, "Y'all, just that ain't my lane of things." So he ended up getting in this other van, and just ended up being people kind of like him doing drugs. He ends up going to a place doing shrooms, and then next thing you know, a lot of it's a blur, and then he wakes up on the family estate, just butt naked, face down, and Jeffrey's the one that ended up finding him. So that was I wasn't expecting that storyline to go that direction, because I thought Jimmy was ducking and covering because he knew he screwed up. It's like, no, his phone ran out of juice, he was hitchhiking, and it's just one thing after another. He even said how all this bad energy just kind of started gravitating towards him. I'm gonna keep up with the thread of Jimmy, just because of how it ties into the ending of the episode with the whole Gabrielle situation. So the people who stole the van, it looked like they chucked some of it in the water. I don't know if that was them just burning the van to cover their tracks, or whether they were actually burning the weed, because it looked like they were dumping it in the water. So my thought process is one of two things. One, they're covering their tracks by burning the van, and they're tossing the weed in the water because they're planning on grabbing that up later on. My other thought was, not unless they end up being a group where they're trying to, maybe they're a third group or whatever, or another group that's out there that deals in getting rid of either their fellow weed competitors, and that could be why they're trying to grab the weed from them. Because we've run into people so far, once again, it's been people in the coke business and the meth business, but we haven't directly run into any other lane of people in the exact same business, which has been the whole point that Susie's tried to avoid. So this could be competition in their particular lane, or what I was really thinking was, not unless they're hey, we're getting rid of all the drugs because drugs are terrible and we're vigilantes getting rid of it. Because obviously they know enough about Susie and them's operation to know that Jimmy would stop at Patty's. They already had that set up and everything. To be fair, he makes it clear that's his routine. He stops by there all the time. So that's the problem with being when you're a criminal, you can't get predictable. Or at least when you're part of an enterprise, you need to change up where you go. Don't make yourself predictable, because you're likely to get jacked the moment people is oh, I see a pattern in where you go. You gotta switch it up. You can't hit up Pat. Once again, it's Jimmy, so still. I'm curious to see where that lane of things go. The other girl even called her out, oh, you actually like him, and Gabrielle was like, no, I don't. It's no, I think she actually does. It's there is something charming about Jimmy. He's that stoner that you're but you're kind of cool, dude. I like Jimmy, but I'm like, I can see, like, Jimmy has a certain charm to him, so it's going to be interesting to find out what that storyline's all about, especially because who they're working for, we never actually got to see their face. Now, I don't know if that's their boss or that's just one of the fellow, like they're, like, middle management, they're, like, the lower end, like, either they're kind of, like, we handle stuff, but we answer to someone higher up in the ranks, or that is their boss. They went out of their way to hide his face, so it feels like that could end up being pertinent. It'd be interesting if it ends up being like someone we know. Like, the fact is they went out of their way to hide his identity. It might be a twist and reveal. Like, I don't know if that's gonna be like a reveal of like, oh yeah, that's Jeffrey, like Jeff. I don't know. Like, the fact is that he's on the property, like, he's supposed to keep the family secret safe. That ended up even being a conversation between him and what's the mom's name? I think I saw it in the subtitles. It's like Sabrina, I believe. But what I thought was so interesting with that conversation was, because I had brought it up last episode, I was like, yeah, mom seems super nonchalant about all of this stuff. But as I know, she is in fact concerned, but it's just kind of like, at least things being status quo what they were, their dad never got directly involved. The problem is Eddie, in his attempt to remove them from the criminal world, has gotten directly involved and is dragging his brother into it as well. It's like, to be fair, none of this would have happened if it wasn't for Freddie and his debts. Like, he ended up putting this situation into play. But it's like, yeah, they're both having their own roles in all of this. But she was kind of concerned, and she's like, Jeffrey, I appreciate your loyalty to this family. You'll tell me if my son's ever in any real trouble. And Jeff's like, I'll keep my ear low to the ground, which I was like, that's interesting. So, like, I guess she's trying to pretend like everything's okay, and we even saw when Eddie and Freddie took off to go steal the car, she was, like, in the window looking, and then she just turns out the lights. But it's like, yeah, she's concerned. Even to the point she gets on Eddie later on, because Eddie's like, I didn't want to get him involved. It's like, yeah, but you nearly did. So it's that thing of like, you promised to get rid of these criminals from our lives, not have us dive deeper into it. And it's just like, it's kind of like in an attempt to get away. I mean, he kind of made it clear to Bobby last episode, I'll make you more money than ever, because it's like, that's the only way he's going to. It's almost like he's kind of buying, like kind of doing a buyout of like, I'll make you so much money and make this so profitable. Either it's going to be an operation that you can take from our property and allocate somewhere else and continue making the big bucks. We'll kind of boost it in that way. Or it's just like, I'm going to make you so much money, I'm going to buy out our involvement and never have any involvement with you. Like, I don't know how he plans on going about that. But it always meant staying involved with them. But never, once again, very much like they're not to this extent, I'm sure. So, but it's all popped off because of the Jimmy situation and getting his weed stolen. The person they're supposed to give the weed to, Tony, is not patient. He doesn't want a delay. They got busted on something, so they can't steal cars like they're supposed to. So they're hiring Susie and them to steal a very specific car for them. But Susie's like, I'm too busy. This is kind of below my pay grade. And it's like, you can use this as an opportunity to work for us. Because what was interesting, too, is that she said this specifically came for her dad, which I'm like, is that true? Is that bullshit? Because obviously, Eddie wants to stay in good graces with Bobby, because it's like Bobby's the one you interact with. He's the head of the gang and everything. But that's what I was bringing up last episode of Susie's kind of running things while her dad's away. How much say does she have? Versus like, no, her dad dictates everything, or how much it's like, no, she has a lot more runway to do whatever she wants to. He gives her some marching orders, but for the most part, it's her own situation. Because you're also wondering, like, did she lie about Bobby's involvement, him saying this? Because she's taking an interest in Eddie, because she was talking to her brother about it. It's like, yeah, he's the fact is that he's cool, calm, and collected. Most people will have fallen apart after killing someone like he did last episode, but he didn't. The fact is, because Eddie toes that line, because he is very, like, matter of fact about the whole thing. Like, either he's, like, I think it's going to be that thing of, there's a darkness in Eddie, and who knows what that stems from, whether that's just always been there, maybe it's part of being a soldier. There's a lot that could stem from that, but she's impressed with how he handles it, how he toes that line of dealing with the upper echelon of society, but when shit gets, like, crazy, he can really get down if need be and keep his calm and collect. Like, he can do what's necessary. And in their particular world, how they toe that balance someone like Eddie is perfect. So she's taking a real interest in Eddie. And then, so she could just be saying that, all that stuff of like, oh yeah, my dad said this, could all be bullshit just to keep Eddie strung along because she needs him and she likes him and wants to, not necessarily likes him in that way, maybe, but it's more so from a professional standpoint of you're good at what you do and our organization could blossom so much more because you have a knack for this, you have a talent for this. So. But yeah, either way, they are to steal a very particular car from a woman named Mercy, which I kept looking at her. I was like, is that who I think it is? Because I was looking at her, I was like, she kind of looks familiar, and I was hearing her voice. I was like, is that who I think it is? And it is. The actress's name is Martha Milian. The thing I best know her for, she's in The Cleaning Lady. She plays Fiona. She's one of the main characters in the show. And what was throwing me is like, because obviously in the Cleaning Lady, she's just got black hair, and then she had the blonde hair she has in this is what's kind of throwing me. But it's like I said, it was specifically hearing her voice. I was like, oh yeah, like that sounds like her. But yeah, which interesting timing too, because The Cleaning Lady came back for its third season. I still haven't watched the premiere yet at the time of recording this. I need to change that immediately. But yeah, it was just like, oh, that's so dope that's her. It's interesting too, because obviously like what The Cleaning Lady involves, once again, it's kind of like, it's like the Giancarlo Esposito of it all, of like, oh yeah, he's been involved in a handful of crime dramas, and now it's like, oh, here he is, once again, with Breaking Bad, connected to meth, here he is, selling meth, and now she's like connected to drugs and stuff in The Cleaning Lady, and so like to be in that same boat here, because turns out she's also in the cocaine lane of things, which are like, interesting. I wonder, does that put you in, I was about to say, does that put you in competition with Stanley, but it's like, no, Stanley's meth. She's in the coke business, because they never actually found out whose coke it actually was. I mean, maybe it was her coke that was, no, because wasn't he supposed to, I can't remember if like that, well, I think that's, the whole point was Tony lied about the whole situation. He just made it seem like he had a buyer for the car without letting anyone know, hey, there's a shit ton, a metric shit ton, rather, a metric fuck ton of coke scattered throughout the car. What was like 3.5 mil worth of coke. And he had sent a guy in there already, and that involved the missing finger that Eddie found. But I love that whole situation, getting Freddie involved, which Freddie was like, hey, I owe you my life. I'm not going to fuck this up. It's like, Freddie, just keep it simple. Keep your mouth shut. I'm going to do all the talking. And wham, tam, I'm going to involve you. Which I thought I love that she's just this background character and she steps up in this particular way. I'm like, why did they get her for this one specifically? Is that, does wham, tam have like a very specific like past or whatever? Like, we don't know nothing about her much. And she's popped up in a few scenes, but she's like the person we know next to nothing about. Like, I mean, obviously they know her, but we don't know how her and Freddie met, like what the whole situation with her is. But she was whipping that car like crazy. And so it's like, I don't know if what that says about her in totality of like, it probably gives you a little insight into her, like, past and stuff, but still. And for Eddie to know to have her involved in all of this means like, yeah, like it's just kind of a known factor about her. But I love like Eddie was like, yo, no performances. And what does Freddie do? It's like, oh, he puts on a Russian accent, acts like he's some rich hotshot. And, I mean, it gets him in the door, but even partway through it, he dropped the accent a little bit. And even Mercy and some others were looking at him like, what the fuck was that? And he just immediately put the accent back on. It's like, why create an accent? You could create a character, sure, have fun with it. Don't create an accent that you're going to have to keep up, you idiot. Because that's why I even love Eddie Brown was like, oh, what are you doing? Like, don't fuck this up, Freddie. It's like, but he's going to, and he does, ultimately. Because later on, after copying the key, they ended up coming back, doing the classic Grand Theft Auto. That term will forever be, I'm sure, like, there's a generation of people that will never, like, when you think Grand Theft Auto, I don't even think of, like, I mean, obviously, it's the crime itself, but I don't even think about it. I don't think about the crime itself, even though that's where the game gets its title from. Like, my immediate thought will always be the franchise. I'm sure there's going to be there is a generation that when you hear Grand Theft Auto, you'll be like, oh, the game? No, they're talking about the crime. Oh. Like, once again, it's one and the same. That's where the title comes from, but it's like, the crime itself isn't what I think of. I just think of, like, the property that is Grand Theft Auto, the video game franchise. It's one of those interesting things where, like, words and terms and stuff will always be associated with something, and you'll never be able to disassociate them, you know? Like when I hear the word charmed, I'm never going to think of the actual word charmed. I'm just going to think about the TV show Charmed, which, that's all about them actually being utilizing the word charmed. And it's you get what I'm saying? It's one of those weird things. It's fascinating. I'm sure there's plenty of examples of it that I'm just not thinking of. That's the one that came to my mind. But yeah. But either way, Eddie went in there to steal the car, runs into a guy who had a bag over his head, and then like Freddy was like, he didn't want to leave his brother behind because like, oh shit could go wrong. But it's like, yeah, you caused more problems sticking around, Freddy, because you ended up getting captured. And I love like one of Mercy's dude, the dude who's kind of like, stealth like running like that. I was like, there's something scary and menacing about him strolling up like that. And I love that Freddy tried to pretend like he was asleep. I mean, at least he had to, I was like, just your luck is horrendous, because just as you were about to leave, the car would not like turned off and wouldn't crank. Like, I get, because it's such a classic car, I guess like maybe it doesn't get taken out like it should, so it's not up to maintenance. So either way, Freddy got caught. The guy that was with Eddie revealed like, hey, this is all this coke. Tony set me up to go in there just like he set you up. I gotta get out of here. And as he steps out into the road, gets hit. I was like, the poor bastard, man. The guy was tortured, had one of his pinkies cut off. It's like, come on, dude. That sucks. Poor guy. He's the one that was actually helping out. He was looking out for Eddie too. He's like, yo, if I were you, I'd get away from this situation. It's like, poor guy. And Eddie just got splattered with the blood, and I love that he's telling this story to Susie, so she kind of helps clean him up. He gets to call for Mercy. They stroll up when it comes, and she's very scary of like, oh, yeah, I've got to make a point. Once again, it's about, you can't look weak. If word gets out that I was robbed and I didn't do anything about it, it makes me look bad. So I have to make a point. And, like, oh, and she's also making a point to Eddie of like, oh, it has to be a learning experience, which I think it's interesting because Jeff said the exact same thing to Jimmy, because he's like, I'm not going to chastise you for your choices. You do what you got to do as long as you learn something from it, which it kind of feels like Jimmy didn't, but kind of did, because he's like, yeah, I won't smoke, in the morning or before I eat lunch or before I eat this and that. He was like, I'll smoke once in the evening. That's it, So, hey, cutting back that much speaks volumes, but I mean, he kind of took some lesson away from it, but he's still like wrapped around Gabrielle's fingers by the end of the episode, but still. So it's just interesting to kind of have that through line where it's like, oh, Freddy's meant to learn a lesson. He's like, hey, this is perfectly clear. We don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything to me. I will never, it's like the whole point of dissuading you from doing anything in the future. He's like, no, I am perfectly dissuaded. She's like, well, it's got to be an eye for an eye situation, You steal from me, I'll cut off your hand, which Freddy's like, to be fair, I never actually stole anything from you, which is like, right, Eddie? And Eddie's like, you're absolutely right, Freddy. It's like, yeah. And the one behind all this was Tony. And she proceeded to butcher him. She sliced him up, and I just love, like, the whole just everyone staring, because you have Susie staring straight ahead, you have Eddie just staring straight ahead, and, like, Freddy's the one that's, like, one screaming. And even her boys, like, the guys that work for Mercy, just kind of like, yeah, but she's leaning into it, blood covering her face. She's kind of, like, giddy about the whole thing. It's like, damn. And as they're leaving, Freddy gets out the car to throw up, and that's when Susan's like, wow, you're made for this. You got more for this than your brother does. So he seems to be trying to hold it together, but yeah, he's falling to pieces. He was already kind of a wreck to begin with, but this is going to make matters even worse in the grand scheme of things for him. So some very, very, very interesting developments all around. I'm curious to see where the next episode takes us as we, once again, this Gabrielle, I keep saying her name, Gabrielle situation and who she works for and what that's all about. I doubt we're done with the gospel and his group. Stanley isn't going away either, so. But once again, it's this episode in particular really cemented it even more for Susie of like how useful someone like Eddie is, despite him wanting to, because he had that whole conversation with his brother Freddie being like, okay, so to not be criminals, we do something criminal-like. And just like with the because the UK has there's a British slang for that. I don't remember what it's called. Because here in the States we call them ski masks, but like, like when I was like, oh, that person was wearing a ski mask. Like, there's a very specific British term for them, and I can't remember what it's called. But it's like, yeah, it might just be called a hoodie. That might be what they refer to it as. I don't remember. Do correct me in the comments down below. But yeah, it's like, we're not criminals, as he's going in there to like steal a car from a criminal, So maybe that's also how he can justify it. It's like, right, we're doing some bad stuff, but it's not like we're doing bad stuff to innocent people, because that's where he drew the line with Jethro, but unaware that Jethro's dead. I don't know. Maybe there's going to be a twist where it's like Felix didn't kill him, but it's heavily implied he's dead, which begs the question: Will Eddie ever find out about it? Because also, what happened to that $2 million they sent him? Did they just was that a finder's fee for Felix, or did that get sent back to Susie? Questions like that I'm curious about. But yeah, I'm excited to see where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.